Aloha, God Potters. Welcome to the final episode of this season of Leaving the Church to Find God. I am so happy to have you here with me today. We're going to dive deep into the concept of shadow work and exploring how our inner light is essential for understanding our shadows. I've been teasing at this one for a while, and I've been really waiting because I wanted to get it right. I feel like shadow work is such an important part of one's spiritual awakening, understanding ourselves, our inner growth, all of those good things. And today we're going to journey through some personal reflections, some scientific insights, and spiritual perspectives to uncover the profound connections between light, shadow, and our human experience. So, what are shadows? In the context of our inner world, shadows are the parts of ourselves that we suppress or deny, often out of fear, shame, or misunderstanding. These are traits, emotions, or memories that we hide away, hoping that they'll stay out of sight and out of mind. However, that which we resist persists. I know you'll hear me say that often, and it's true. The more we hide from these shadows, the more we look away, the more they're going to show up in our own lives and in our perceptions of others, because we are always reflecting, right? What we see is a reflection of our own inner worlds, inner light, which includes the shadows. So what we're suppressing and hiding from, it's not making it go away. It's just going to show up in other ways in our lives. So let's consider this from a scientific standpoint. Our bodies emit energy, and we are, in a very real sense, beings of light. It isn't just metaphorical. Biophotons are tiny particles of light emitted by biological systems, including our own bodies. And when you think about light passing through a prism, it splits into a spectrum of colors. Similarly, our energy comprises a spectrum of emotions and experiences. Shadows, then, are like the areas where this light is obstructed or diminished. Shadows can manifest in various ways, perhaps as lingering fears, deep seated insecurities, or suppressed emotions that we haven't fully acknowledged. For example, you may find yourself reacting strongly to criticism, and it's not because of the comment itself, but because it touches on an unresolved shadow of self doubt. And there's layers of shadows. It's important to recognize that shadows exist on multiple levels. There's personal shadows, we have ancestral shadows, and we have collective shadows. Understanding the layers, it helps us to see the shadows that are a universal aspect of our human journey. So, I want to dive deeper into personal shadows by exploring the concept of the inner child and internal family systems, or IFS. The inner child represents our original self. I know I've talked about this a little bit in other episodes. It's that innocent, playful, and vulnerable part of us that experiences the world with wonder, that doesn't have all these preconceived notions of what the world is, of what other people are, of what to expect. It's very open, free, unencumbered. However, throughout our lives, we encounter situations that may wound the inner child. These experiences can lead us to create shadows as protective mechanisms. Or if you ever hear anybody talk about parts work, we split off into these different parts of ourselves that are the internal family system. And often what's happening and what's limiting us, or what's controlling us, or, controlling our emotions, is these parts of us that we've created in order to hide our shadows or to protect those shadows. They show up in all these ways that obstruct us from seeing our light, from shining our light. So, in internal family systems, it's a therapeutic model that it views this mind and these multiple parts, each with their own perspective and feelings. So, some parts are exiled or suppressed because they're associated with pain or trauma, the shadows. And by acknowledging and communicating with these parts, we can heal the wounds of our inner child. We can shine light on these shadows and bring love to them, right? So we create these shadows when, as children, we learned that certain behaviors or emotions are unacceptable. Maybe we're told not to cry or not to be so sensitive. So we suppress our sadness. Perhaps expressing anger led to punishment. So we hide that emotion away. And, then we don't express this very vital part of ourselves. And over time, these suppressed parts, they become our shadows. because they're hiding. They're hiding from our light. They're hiding from us. We don't see them. However, they're very much ruling our lives and our perception of the world. Ancestral shadows are these patterns, beliefs, and traumas passed down through generations. They are the legacies of our ancestors that continue to influence us, often unconsciously. Engaging in decolonial shadow work is crucial here. It's about unearthing the healing wounds inflicted by colonialism, not just on a societal level, but within ourselves. For me, this journey has been deeply personal and transformative, and it's led me to align my business and brand with the mission to decolonize capitalism. By addressing these ancestral shadows rooted in exploitation and oppression, I'm working towards creating economic systems that are equitable, that are sustainable and compassionate, things that align with my truth, my light, the love that is within us, right? And for me, it's more than a professional endeavor. It's a continuation of my own ancestral healing. I was recently brought into this decolonial shadow work through my own breathwork experiences, and I didn't realize like how long I had carried these. Like once I saw it, I could see how my entire life I have held on to this guilt and this pain of what my native ancestors went through. I had ancestors that were on the Trail of Tears, that my great grandfather was left with some pioneers so that he wouldn't be killed like as a baby, and left and raised by this Jewish family. And I experienced some memories of this and of some rejection from not being one of the official, one of the children from the father of this. And it's so interesting because I had a memory of this person stepping over me as a baby and just like not acknowledging that I existed as a person. And it wasn't my memory, it was a memory of one of my ancestors. And I know, y'all, this sounds out there. And if somebody had told me this a few years ago, I would have been like, yeah, okay, yeah, whatever. But this really happened, and the memory was so vivid and visceral. Like I felt it in my body. There was so much pain attached to this. And then I put it together. There's a story that I've known about my own father, who was not a great father by any means. And I didn't see him, for the first several months of my life. My parents divorced while my mom was pregnant with me. And I had always heard this story as a child of how the first time my dad, met me, basically, he just walked over and like stepped over me, literally stepped over me, did not acknowledge me to go see my sister. And when I had this memory, I didn't even put it together for a few weeks. And then I was like, holy crap. Like that shadow has been there and I've been reliving it in this lifetime. And then I was speaking to a friend of mine who is First Nations, and she was explaining to me the depth of what that means to our ancestors. Like in, Native communities, you don't step over another person. And it really is like disregarding their humanity, or that they are even their own soul or spirit. So that was a very deep act of betrayal and disregard. And I had been carrying that wound of my ancestors. And I know this sounds kind of complex. I'll briefly get into like in Hawaiian, in Hawaii, there is, these different levels of self, and the higher self is the Aumakua. And it can show up in the form of like spirit animals or in our ancestors. And they believe that the higher self is comprised of all of these spirits that are in our soul group that reincarnate with us. And that is the higher self, which, thinking about source energy and us all coming from source and coming from this source of light, that makes sense to me. That adds up. But we can't escape that. We can't escape that pain and that history of our ancestors. It's in our cells. It's part of our light. It's part of who we are. And and it's not our job to just come here and do a bunch of work. However, when there are shadows, when we see these shadows, those are there for us to shine light on. And it can feel like work, yes, but I can tell you on the other side of it, it is pure liberation. And I don't know if you remember episode 6, I had Dr. Christina Cleveland on. She's amazing. And she has this course. You can go to her site. I'll link it in the description, and it's drchristinacleveland.com. And she has this free course. It's a 28-day shameless liberation. And it really goes into these colonial shadows, the shadows of our ancestors. Like for me and for many of us, we have both the ancestors who were the oppressed and the ancestors who were the oppressors. So, and that's, with Native people, with Black people, there's so much of this colonialism that is infused within us, that her course is so powerful because it really helps to face all of it, to really uncover some of these shadows. And I didn't even realize until after my conversation with her, actually during my conversation with her on the podcast, that I have been carrying all these wounds of my Native ancestors, but I had also been carrying all this shame and the wounding of my white ancestors, who mostly are Irish. So yes, they were also oppressed, but on my father's side, a lot of English. And, there's no doubt, even in my grandmother's family, it is reasonable to believe that there were somewhere along the line some slave owners. There's a lot of shame in that. So I never would even, I've always considered myself Native. I was taught by my grandfather that that's who we are. We spent a lot of time acknowledging that part of my heritage, but never acknowledged this whiteness. And it's in me. I have a proximity to this whiteness, although I don't necessarily align myself with that. I have this proximity to whiteness that I have received privilege from. So doing the decolonial shadow work isn't just about healing the wounds of my ancestors who were murdered and slaughtered and colonized, but also from my ancestors who were the colonizers. And one of the things that's so important, I share a lot in my stories from this one Indigenous woman who's a doctor. Her name escapes me right now. I apologize, but I will actually link her social media in the description as well. But she talks about how, white people, and people joke about it or talk about it with appropriation, and how white people are always adopting other cultures. But, white people had their own culture. White people had a strong, especially, I mentioned the Irish heritage, but even in all of these different aspects, they had a deep culture that was lost in this colonialism. So it's hurting everybody. It's keeping everyone from their own truth and their own true nature. And collective shadows, they encompass societal issues, cultural norms, shared human experiences that affect all of us, right? They manifest in systemic injustices like racism, sexism, environmental degradation. Guys, we cannot deny that we have really screwed up the earth, but the cool thing is we barely touch the surface of earth, and she can heal herself. But don't we want humanity to be included in that healing? We don't want to be wiped out in that healing. We can do our part to stop degrading the earth by doing our own environmental shadow work. I'm just going to throw that one in there. But these shadows show up in our institutions. They show up in the policies that are made, and even in our everyday interactions. Recognizing these collective shadows is essential because it allows us to address the root causes of societal problems, not just the systems. Because we can, bring down a system, but if the root hasn't been addressed, we're just going to recreate the same thing. We have this in Hawaii, this African tulip. I think, Lundberg, maybe? I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was this famous writer that lived here. His wife, this is the story that I've heard. His wife loved, it's that colonial mindset too, but his wife loved the African tulip. But if you think about the Maui climate, we're in the tropics, and they lived over here in Hana, where it's the rainforest, some of the heaviest rainfall in the world, over 400 inches a year. And they lived here in Hana, and she loved the African tulip. So he brings some seeds over from the African tulip. Now think about Africa and that climate. It's very dry. The area where this came from, Africa is huge and has all these different climates, but where this came from is very dry, arid desert. So this plant had evolved to survive in that environment. So it sheds thousands of seeds. And in its natural environment, maybe one of those thousands would plant itself and grow. But here in the tropics, they all grow. And once the root system is established, you can't get rid of it. Like, you cut a tree down and literally 10 more will pop up. And that's not an exaggeration. They say it's actually 10 to 1. And I have this experience right now where I live. You know, when I moved in, there was this one African tulip growing in the gulch. I've been there a year and a half, and they're everywhere now, and they grow so fast. But that's also that, like, colonial mindset of, like, we can do whatever we want without consequences. But there are consequences, because these trees, they take up all the resources around them, so it kills off native plants. And the native plants are vital to the ecosystem here, to the natural flora and fauna, to the plant, to the animals, to the insects, to everything that lives here, that thrives here, that keeps this environment what it is. Because of these, like, we've got the coqui frogs. Holy moly, you guys have heard the coqui frogs on the podcast. Listen to episode 1. They're there. Everywhere. It's these invasive species. And this happens, like, we have mongoose. They brought the mongoose, the colonizers, the whalers that would come here and go whaling in Lahaina. They brought the mongoose to kill the rats. But the thing is, rats are nocturnal and mongoose hunt in the day. So now we have a ton of rats and a ton of mongoose. It's that separation from the earth, separation from our environment. It's that's part of the colonial mindset of, we own this. We're in dominion over this. When in reality, we work together. We literally, like, if I need to recharge my batteries, if I'm feeling drained, and those words aren't an accident. Like, I'll say those words and I'm like, oh, listen to that. When I'm feeling drained, I get barefoot and I go walk on the earth for a few minutes, and I automatically start to feel better. If it's really a lot, then I'll just lay on the ground, and automatically, like, it literally recharges our batteries. And there's science behind this. So we are part of the earth. We are part of nature. We're made of nature, and we need to work together with that in order to thrive and survive. So it's not just about creating a world where we can make a bunch of money and, destroy the earth in the process. That you can see that we don't stand a chance against that. We can already see in what's happening with these superstorms and the ocean rising and warming. I've seen firsthand the coral die off here. In the time that I've lived here, it used to be so colorful and beautiful. And now you go on these coral gardens, look like swamp land, and they're covered in algae and they're gray, and, the bright colors aren't there anymore. The life isn't there anymore. The fish aren't, like, swimming through them like they were. So this does have an impact on all of us, on our descendants, on ourselves, on our quality of life, and on the earth, which we are a part of. So these shadows, they show up everywhere. And by recognizing these collective shadows, it's so essential, because it allows us to address these root causes. And again, they're not just like, we can deal with the symptoms. We can try to deal with things that, we've got the ocean cleanup. That's great. That's cleaning up the Great Pacific garbage patch in the ocean. But those are just addressing the symptoms. We have to get to the problem, the root of these problems. And that's by doing our shadow work. And it starts within. I know the things that I'm talking about, they can feel so big and overwhelming. But when we start with our own, don't be shortened. When we start with our own inner shadows, our own personal shadows, then the rest of it just kind of becomes a byproduct. It just becomes a natural part of the process. And we all have shadows. Remember, having shadows, it doesn't make us flawed. It makes us human. They're not burdens to carry. They're opportunities for profound growth and self-discovery. By acknowledging and embracing our shadows, personal, ancestral, and collective, we begin the journey towards healing and wholeness. So, why do we have these shadows? What's the purpose of this? Abraham Hicks refers to it as contrast, right? The role of contrast, it's essential for our growth. It's a friction that sparks transformation. I mentioned it before. We're co-creators with the universe, right? We're God experiencing itself, always expanding, always growing, always becoming more and more conscious and aware. Well, in order for that to happen, it's just like, you can't experience joy if you don't know what pain is. That the pain is the contrast. We wouldn't have light without shadows. Like, they're necessary for existence. If we didn't have these shadows, then, there would be no resistance for growth. There would be nothing to cause the growth. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. It gets deep. Maybe we'll do a whole nother episode on that, because on contrast. But contrast it's essential for our growth because of that friction, right? And from both a quantum and a spiritual perspective, it's this interplay of light and shadow that continues to propel us forward, that continues to expand us. And just like a seed, it's got to push through the darkness of the soil to reach the sunlight. We also grow by pushing through the darkness, by navigating our shadows. I told y'all there's going to be some metaphors. From a spiritual viewpoint, the universe or God or source energy, whatever term resonates with you, it doesn't judge our shadows as bad. Instead, they're seen as necessary contrasts that facilitate this expansion and deeper understanding. It's through acknowledging both our light and our shadows that we become whole, because they're both there in full existence. If we only look at our light, then we're not really having the full human experience. We're not recognizing ourselves as whole beings. So why do we avoid our shadows? I'm going to talk about shame. Shame has a huge role in this. It is a tool of oppression. It's a powerful emotion that keeps us from engaging in our shadow work, right? It's a tool that can be used consciously or unconsciously to oppress and control. When we feel shame, we hide these parts of ourselves, which prevents the healing and growth that create the wholeness, right, that we're talking about. There's no shame needed for morality. We're taught that, especially in the church. There's these colonial systems, like that shame is what keeps us moral, like by being ashamed of dirty deeds, right, then we're going to act morally. But it's important to understand that morality doesn't require shame. It's actually quite the opposite. True moral action, it stems from love, empathy, and authenticity, not from fear of judgment or punishment. When we act out of love, we're aligned with our true selves, right? So think of it like this, like, so when we shine a light on all of ourselves, when we shine a light on these shadows, we illuminate these shadows, right? Then we see our essence. So many people avoid this shadow work because they're afraid of what they're going to see. But I can tell you from experience, the more I look at my shadows, the more I look at my own shitty behavior, the more that I look at my own thought patterns and selfishness that creates these masks and these protective behaviors, the more it just sets me free. It doesn't make me see myself and be like, ooh, shameful, you're gross. No, it's like, oh, I see how we've been doing that. I see how that's been reflected in my relationships. Okay, now that I see that, I don't have to do that anymore. I can free myself of that. And it doesn't make me angry at myself or hate myself. I'll usually say something like, Melissa, I forgive you for that. I forgive you and I release that. I'm going to release any shame attached to that, any need to punish myself for that. And it actually just increases my feelings of self-love and self-worth and wholeness. It genuinely does. Like, all these things that we're afraid to look at, when we look at them, it just makes life more beautiful and more enriching. It really increases the love of myself and the love of my life. That's from my own experience, and from others that I've talked to. So, try it for yourself and see what you think. But true moral actions, they stem from what we are, from love, from empathy, from authenticity, not from a fear of judgment or punishment. If we're acting morally out of a fear of judgment or punishment, that's really just more hiding from the shadows. And it's not the truth of who we are. But when we're acting out of love, our essence, then we're aligned with our true selves. And the beauty of that can shine through. By confronting and embracing these shadows, we strip the shame of its power. We begin to reveal our true selves. the essence of love and light that resides within each of us. That's our truth, our true essence. God is love, right? Our essence is this love and this light. I know, hippy dippy, love and light, right? But it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to live it. And we live it by facing our shadows and by shining our light. It's the same thing. We shine our light and it illuminates the shadows. But I want to get into the quantum science of light and shadow, the science of being made of light. We can explore this fascinating world of quantum physics together for a moment. I'm not going to get too deep because it is way more than I can even comprehend or put into words, but I do understand it and comprehend it on a cellular level. I think that you will too, so just follow along with me. But scientists have discovered that our bodies emit low levels of light, like literally. They're known as biophotons. And while this light isn't visible to the naked eye, it's a testament to the fact that we are quite literally beings of light. And just as light can be broken down into a spectrum of colors, we all have our own spectrum. We all have the light that we are emitting is our own spectrum of colors, which I think is so cool. And our energy comprises a spectrum of emotions, thoughts, and experiences. So each of us have our own unique energetic signature. It's a personal spectrum that defines who we are. And in quantum terms, shadows exist because of light. They are inseparable. Similarly, our personal shadows exist because we possess inner light. The brighter we shine, the more defined our shadows become, offering clearer opportunities for growth and understanding. So as we step into our light, embracing our talents, expressing our truths, and living authentically, our shadows become more apparent. It's not something to fear, though. It's an invitation to heal and to integrate those hidden parts of ourselves. Again, bringing wholeness. Interestingly, when we shine brightly, our light can illuminate the shadows of those around us. We talked about this in the last episode. This may trigger discomfort or even resistance in them as they are confronted with their own suppressed aspects. They may even reflect that onto you. People talk about projection. And that's okay, because even if it affects a relationship negatively, we have to trust that process and trust that we're meant to move in a different direction at that point, and also trust that they're either going to do their work around that or they're not. And it's not our job to do that work for them or to even explain to them that they need to do that work. It's our job to keep shining our light. And then it's up to them what they do with that, if they face their shadows or not. But this process, it can also inspire others to embark on their own journey of self-discovery. Each person confronts and heals their shadows when they begin to shine brighter, creating a ripple effect of healing and elevated consciousness throughout their communities. We did a little visualization at the end of the last episode that really, brings that together. I invite you to check that out if you haven't already. But have you ever felt envious or uneasy around someone who seems to be truly living their purpose? That's your shadow signaling an area ripe for exploration. Instead of turning away, consider what their light is revealing about your own untapped potential. Use these moments as catalysts for growth. Acknowledge the feelings and understand their roots, and let them guide you toward your own light. Remember, someone else's brightness doesn't diminish yours. It can help you find the switch to your own, in fact. And the more that we all shine our light, the bigger that light becomes. And the more that we're all shining our light, the more that light increases, the more we expand consciousness, the more that's going to affect the world around us, both physically, spiritually, in all the ways. We will see our world heal. We'll see people start to heal. We'll see society start to heal. But it all starts with us facing our shadows. And again, I just can't express enough how the things that we're avoiding are the key to everything that we're looking for. And I know that sounds counterintuitive. I really do. But I will say it once, I will say it a million times. The truth is in your shadows. The things that you are looking for are hiding where you're avoiding. It's such an honor to look at those shadows. It seems so scary at first, but like with anything, it's a muscle, and the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. And once you start experiencing the rewards of it, the more it's just like, oh yeah, no big deal. To where it took some time. It took a lot of inner work, but at this point, when my shadows come up, I mostly just laugh and just kind of, again, like, give myself some forgiveness and acceptance, and it just makes me smile and have a deeper understanding of myself, a deeper understanding of my inner workings and how they're affecting my life, the choices that I'm making, the patterns that have been repeating, how they're affecting the people around me. The more I can see how me trying to hide these parts of myself actually make them bigger in other people's eyes, and we feel like we're so sneaky and like we're hiding, and what we're showing is what people are seeing, but what people are feeling, what people are really sensing is the shadows that we're hiding from. And they show up in that way as darkness because they're still shadows, right? But when we're shining our light on them, when we just own it and we illuminate those shadows, then they show up as light, as love, as acceptance. And people don't see those shadows as something that's broken or bad about us. They see the light and they want to be around it. They want more of it. And again, they might not want that once you start triggering their shadows, and they start, that light starts shining and they see their own shadows. But I can't tell you in my life, like, it's really, we all have our own human design, right? And part of my human design is just me being myself triggers people. I was born with this very sureness, this knowing of who I am, of the potential of my soul, of empathy, understanding, like a desire to grow, a desire to learn, a desire to shine. And that has triggered so many people in my life. And for so long, for me, it was just confirmation that I'm unlovable, that I'm bad, that there's something fundamentally wrong with me. But I can't tell you how many times people who like went off on these rants and told me all these terrible things about me have come back to me later on down the road and apologized and been like, actually, that was my stuff, which I find really surprising. It's not something that I would expect from people, from what we know or what we think about people. But I can imagine that if it's happened to me, it's happened to others as well. And that's the thing, is you just have to accept the results. When you're shining your light, if it triggers people, it's okay. If they walk away, let them. It's okay. If they start projecting and trying to convince you that you're somebody that you're not, then that's a great sign that it's time for you to walk away. And that can sound so scary and like, oh, if I do that, I remember when I really started doing this shadow work, I thought about it and I'm like, holy crap, if I walk away from all of this like toxic dynamics, I'm not really going to have very many people in my life. But what I can say is that's been such a blessing, because it's created space for people who are standing in their own truth and standing in their own light. And now my light shines brighter because I'm surrounded by people who are shining their lights as well. And that's a collective thing that grows. So again, we can use these moments as catalysts for our own growth. Stepping into our light, acknowledging these feelings, understanding the roots of these feelings, it only expands us. It makes life better. I can tell you, it makes life better. I will give you my word on that. And sometimes things feel like they're getting worse before they get better. And I invite you to lean into that, because that's where the shadows are. That's where the truth is. If you are feeling stuck or lost or confused or angry or discouraged, look in the shadows. Your truth is in the shadows. So as always, I'm going to leave you with some practical tools. And I mentioned this a lot, even though I am the worst about journaling. As much as I love it, my neurodivergence makes it hard for me to do anything consistently. But I do it when I do it, and it's great. But start with journaling. You can write down your triggers and the emotions that surface as a result of those. Ask yourself some probing questions like, why does this bother me? That one is so telling. When you're bothered, why does this bother me? What does this say about me? How do I see this in myself? This thing that I think is so awful about this other person. How do I see this in myself? That practice, it brings these subconscious shadows into conscious awareness. Of course, if it's available to you, I recommend working with a therapist who does shadow work, who understands that, or internal family systems, or whatever it feels that resonates with you. Always shop around, find the right fit for you. If you don't feel like you're really getting growth from your therapy sessions, then find someone else. If that's not an option to you, again, there's so many tools. I offer breath work because it was never really something I was planning to do, but it's just been so powerful for me in all of this, in my growth, in releasing and relieving trauma, and the shadow work, and connecting with my spirit self, connecting with my ancestors, connecting with my guides, like just connecting with these parts of myself and just expanding. Breathwork has been so powerful. I use David Elliott's 3-part pranayama breath. It's kind of in the middle. Like there's, just breathing. And that's what so many people think of when they think of breathwork. It's like meditative breathing. That's sort of it. I mean, that's a form of breath work. And then there's like Wim Hof and this really intense, where you're going to be crying and screaming in agony. And, it's like really intense, and it can actually make things worse by, triggering these wounds that you don't have a way of integrating or healing. And I'm not saying that Wim Hof is bad. Some, people have gotten really a lot of value out of that. But I love the breath work that I do because it's in the middle. There are times when I cry and scream, and there are times when I can't stop laughing. And most of the time, I can't even think of one time where it wasn't the case. But when I finish a breathwork session, it can be so like deep and heavy. You would think I would just want to go home and meditate, but usually my heart is so open and I feel so uplifted. No matter how deep the session was, I just feel so uplifted, and it makes me want to be around people and that light, and just like shine that light. So I do offer these breathwork sessions. If you're here on Maui, I can do it in person. It's a lot of fun. I bring, oils and tools and implements that enhance the process. I also do these online. This is completely available. We can do one-on-one sessions. I have a really amazing couples practice that is great for friendships, family relationships, romantic relationships, that really helps to like work through things that are keeping you from seeing each other's light and just really reflecting those shadows to each other. And then it's followed with the breathwork session. All of this is available. If you go to my website at livealoud.com, and on the homepage, there's a block that says work with me. Or if you go into the services tab at the top of the website, you can go through there. I have a few different offerings, but the breathwork is in there, and I love it. I love to share this amazing gift with people. And I have it's really affordable. I have some plans in there, if you wanted to do multiple sessions. There's some mentoring, available as well. There's a lot that's there in those offerings at livealoud.com. So if you're interested in doing some shadow work, reach out to me. Or if you're wanting some mentoring around this, or around any part of your conscious expansion, growth, deconstructing religion, any of that journey, it's available. I love this work. I love to share what I've learned. I love to expand with people. I love to shine our lights together. I love to face those dark places together. I absolutely love this work. So if you're feeling called to it, reach out. You can also just reach me through the podcast, but the website's nice because you can see it all laid out, and the prices and everything that's available. Another thing is meditation and reflection. Set aside some time for meditation and quiet reflection, especially after you've done this journaling. Create a safe space to sit with your emotions without judgment, always without judgment. This stillness, it allows insights to surface organically. When something does surface that you feel shame around, or you feel is bad part of you, I invite you to just give it some love, to don't run from it, but to lean into it. And once you lean into it, you see that it's not so scary. that on the other side of it, it's just more love. It's just more beauty, more wholeness. Just lean into it. Lean into the discomfort. Lean into the fear. Lean into the uncomfortable feelings. They don't go away by suppressing them. The only way through it is to feel it. When you feel something uncomfortable arise, sit with it. Feel it. I'm leaving you with some stuff because I won't see y'all for a few weeks. I don't know when I'm going to come back on. I'm guessing like between 4 and 6 weeks. I'm just going to intuitively feel that out when it feels right. But I will let you know online. If you follow me, if you join the newsletter or the email list, you'll get updates on that and when we're coming back on, who our guests are, all that good stuff. I'm going to take these next few weeks. Those of you who know, I'm going to school right now. Kind of focus on some of that, focus on building up the brand and getting more items, eco-conscious, sustainable, safe, non-toxic, fair trade items in the marketplace at liveallow.com. I'm going to really work on enhancing and building that up. Take some time from this so that I can show up even better. I'm taking some classes right now that help me make this production even better. I intend to come back greater, better than ever next season. Again, seek some support. If shadow work can be intense, so a therapist, counselor, spiritual guide who can provide tools in a safe environment to navigate these depths. Techniques, again, like internal family systems therapy can be particularly helpful in engaging with your inner child in various parts. I will say, when I say spiritual guides, to tread lightly there. So much of the spiritual world is around bypassing, the ayahuasca journeys and all of this. I'm not saying that there's nothing to be gained from that, but it's not a substitute. It's not a substitute for doing the shadow work. I know people who've done it and done it and done it and feel so enlightened, and their shadows are just like all over the place, ruling their lives. We can't skip it. You can't bypass this work. And I'm actually going to do an episode next season on spiritual bypassing that gets deeper into that, how it exists within the church, how it exists within the spiritual and wellness realm, and how to avoid it for ourselves. But shadow work is the key. Just leaning into those shadows, not running from them. And lastly, but not least, what they say, last but not least, celebrate your progress. This is good stuff, y'all. No matter how small it feels, every step you take in acknowledging and integrating your shadows, it's a victory toward wholeness. It's more light that you're shining. Celebrate yourself. Celebrate this journey. Celebrate the fact that you even listened to this podcast. If you made it through this, celebrate that. Celebrate every bit of it. Show yourself the love. Let that light shine, not just in the world around you, but to yourself. Show yourself love. There's a song I'm going to send you to. I think it's Beautiful Chorus or Jeminel. I'm going to try to link it in the description, but you can look it up. I'm sure if you just search it, it's going to show up, but it's called I Forgive Myself and Release. And that song is like my anthem. It's so good. I highly recommend it. It's just a beautiful, just sit with it, beautiful song. And that's, what it is I forgive myself and release. And it just really helps to release those shadows, like release the fears around the shadows and offer ourselves forgiveness and love and acceptance. Because, we're this whole person. All of us is here. It's all there. Not acknowledging it or ignoring it or shaming it. It's not doing anything. Like, be with the wholeness of you, because it's actually quite beautiful. This human experience, this opportunity to feel, to sense, to smell, to see, to hear, to feel these emotions. As difficult as it may be, we chose this. This is our part in expanding consciousness. This is, know that you are light, you are love experiencing itself. And see that as an opportunity, a beautiful, amazing, full opportunity. Thank you for being through this with me today. We've gone through a lot, some deep stuff, our own personal shadows, our ancestral shadows, our societal shadows. There's a lot there, and it can feel really intense. I do encourage you all to embark on your own shadow work journey with patience and self-compassion. Remember, it's not about perfection, but about becoming whole. Embrace your inner child, honor your ancestors by healing generational wounds, and be courageous in addressing the collective shadow that is impacting us all. Another additional resource you can seek is episode 6 with Dr. Christina Cleveland, and again, her 28-day shameless liberation course that I will tag in the description. These are very powerful tools for anyone who's ready to delve deeper. Stay tuned to our platform for more insights in decolonial practices and how you can contribute to creating equitable systems in your own spheres and living an authentic life of wholeness and truth. As we close this season, I want to express my deepest gratitude for your support and your openness. When we return next season, we'll continue to explore these profound topics. How we're leaving the church, not just the evangelical church, but the systems of colonialism, these systems of oppression, patriarchy, white supremacy that are affecting us all. We'll continue to bring new insights and voices to the conversation. I have some really cool interviews set up already, or conversations to share with you. We're going to dive deeper into these various aspects of our lives and how we can collectively heal and transform. Thank you for being a part of this transformative season of leaving the church to find God. Stay connected, stay curious, and most importantly, stay true to yourself. Keep shining your light, embracing your shadows, and stepping into the fullness of who you are. I will see you next season. Aloha.